Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together so that we can join in the fellowship and study and the sharing of wisdom. I'd like to begin before we start our formal study of our text, our written text, just to acknowledge our current environment, especially over the last 3 weeks. And I have thought about a teaching from the great early Hasidic rabbi, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who said, all of this world is a very narrow bridge. And what I learned from Rabbi Nachman is that to live as a human being is a very precarious experience. And it is very easy to fall off the pathway that continues to lead to wholeness. It's very easy to fall off that pathway and to be pulled down into an abyss that is just negativity through our selfishness, through greed, through abhorrence, through ignoring those in need, through our rapacious urge to possess and dispossess. And Rabbi Nachman advises that, look, all of us are taste of these temptations, these negative temptations. And that's why it's particularly significant that in our sacred literature, in the Bible, the characters that we read about, the characters that propel us forward, are all imperfect characters. They all taste of the negativity that's available in this dimension. Some lie, some cheat, some murder, and these are characters that are presented to us as a recognition that this is what it means to be a human being, is to walk through this very narrow bridge, across this very narrow bridge. And what gets us across, according to Rabbi Nachman, is not to cause ourselves to fear. And what is it that can help us to not cause ourselves to fear? Well, for some, it's an attachment to the presence of the creator of all of this that we call God. For others, it's an attachment to a companionship and a human love that keeps us from falling off that narrow bridge. And I just want to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for your companionships that help me, and I hope one another, to cross that very narrow bridge and avoid the temptations to fall off it into a negativity from which it can be very difficult to pull ourselves out of. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful for all of your presence, for the good things that you do in this world, and for the struggles that each one of us go through to make ourselves continually a better person to cross that bridge. With that, we are in Parshat Lecha, which is a significant one to read through this week as we talk about moving through on a narrow bridge from one dimension to another. It's in the book of Genesis, chapter 12, beginning with verse 1. And if you'd like to unmute, we can say the blessing that gives thanks for being in this moment together. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishamnu mitzvotav Thank you, God. Immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah, that which helps us cross this very narrow bridge. We will read through the English translation of our Torah portion. I'll share with you a focused study about it, and then we'll open it up for our collective collaborative conversation about it. I'll share with you the opening verses, and I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. God said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I shall bless those who bless you, and curse the ones that curse you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. Kath, would you like to read starting with verse 4?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. Abram went forth as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had commanded him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot, and all the wealth that they had amassed, and the persons that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem at the terebinth of Moreh. The Canaanites were then in the land. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh appeared to Abram and said, I will assign this land to your offspring. And he built an altar there to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, who had appeared to him. From there, he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and invoked Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh by name. Then Abram journeyed by stages toward the Negeb.
Thank you. And Sherry, would you like to read starting at verse 10?
Thank you. There was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. If the Egyptians see you and think she is his wife, they will kill me and let you live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may remain alive thanks to you.
Oh, when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw how very beautiful the woman was. Pharaoh's courtiers saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's palace. And because of her, it went well with Abram. He acquired sheep, oxen, asses, male and female slaves, she-asses, and camels.
And why don't one of you finish that next bit from 17 through 20?
But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his household with mighty plagues on account of Sarah, the wife of Abram. Pharaoh sent for Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say, she is my sister, so that I took her as my wife? Now here is your wife. Take her and be gone. And Pharaoh put men in charge of him, and they sent him off with his wife and all that he possessed.
Thank you. Richard, would you like to read at the very start of chapter 13?
Thank you, Hannah. Yes. From Egypt, Abram went up into the Negev with his wife and all that he possessed, together with Lot. Now Abram was very rich in cattle, silver, and gold. And he proceeded by stages from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been formerly between Bethel and Ai, the side of the altar which he had built there at first, and there Abraham invoked the Lord by name. Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support them staying together, for their possessions were so great that they could not remain together. And there was quarreling between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and those of Lot's cattle. Canaanites and Perizzites were then dwelling in the land. Abraham said to Lot, let there be no strife between you and me, between my herdsmen and yours, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Let us separate. If you go north, I'll go south. And if you go south, I'll go north. Lot looked about him and saw how well watered was the whole plain of the Jordan, all of it. This was before the Lord had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. All the way to Zoar, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. Thus they parted, each from the other. Abram remained in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the plain, pitching his tents near Sodom. Now the inhabitants of Sodom were very wicked sinners against the Lord.
Thank you. Dave, would you like to read starting at verse 14 and then also take us into the beginning of chapter 14?
Of course.
Thank you.
And, excuse me. And Adonai said to Abram, after Lot had parted from him, raise your eyes and look out from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. For I give all the land that you see to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, then your offspring too can be counted. Up, walk about the land through its length and its breadth, for I give it to you. And Abram moved his tent and came to dwell in the terebinths of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built an altar there to Adonai.
Now, would you like to continue there just a little bit further?
Oh,
Thank you.
sure. Now when King Amraphel of Shinar, King Arioch of Elasar, King Chedorlaomer of Elam, and King Tidal of Golan made war on King Bera of Sodom, King Bersha of Gomorrah, King Shinab of Adah, King Shember of Zeboim, and King of Bela, which is Zor. All the latter joined forces at the valley of Siddim, now the Dead Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim at Ashertaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim at Ham, the Emim at Shavah Kirithaim, and the Horites in their hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness.
Thank you so much. Let me invite Justin, would you like to read starting at verse 7 there?
Thank you, Rabbi. And they returned and came to Ein Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and they smote the entire field of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who dwelt in Hazezon Tamar. And the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar, came forth, and they engaged them in battle in the valley of Siddim. With Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and Tidal, the king of Goyim, and Amraphel, the king of Shinar, and Arioch, the king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was composed of many clay pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, and they fell there, and the survivors fled to the mountain. And they took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food, and they departed. And they took Lot and his possessions, the son of Abram's brother, they departed, and he was living in Sodom. And the fugitive came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he was living in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol, and the brother of Aner, who were Abram's confederates. And Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, and he armed his trained men, those born in his house, 318, and he pursued them until dawn. And he divided himself against them at night, he and his servants, and smote them, and pursued them until Hobah, which is left of Damascus. And he restored all the possessions, and also Lot his brother and his possessions he restored, and also the women and the people.
Thank you so much, Justin. Let me invite Jay. Would you like to read a little bit starting at verse 17 of chapter 14?
Sure, thank you, Rabbi. When he returned from defeating Kedorlaomer and the kings with him of Shaveh, which is the valley of the king, and King Melchizedek of Salem brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. He blessed him, saying, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your foes into your hand." And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. Then the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons and take the possessions for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I swear to Adonai, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, I will not take so much as a thread or a sandal strap of what is yours. You shall not say, 'It is I who made Abram rich.' For me, nothing but what my servants have used up. As for the share of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their share."
Thank you so much, Jay. Robert, would you like to continue at the very start of chapter 15?
Yes, thank you. After these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward." And Abram said, "Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus?" And Abram said, "Behold to me, thou hast given no seed, and lo, one born in my house is mine heir." And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, "This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir." And he brought him forth abroad and said, "Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them." And he said unto him, "So shall thy seed be." And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. And he said unto him, "I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit it." And he said, "Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it?" And he said unto him, "Take me an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." And when the fowls come down upon the carcass, Abram drove them away. And he took unto him all these and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another, but the birds divided he not. And when the fowls came down upon the carcass, Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, the deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, an honor of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, "Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. And the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, and the Kenizzites, and the Cadmonites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Raphaims, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites.
Thank you so much, Robert. And Gary, would you like to read at the very start of chapter 16?
Now Abram's wife Sarai, who had not borne him a child, had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, seeing as the Eternal has kept me from bearing a child, have intercourse with my slave. Maybe I will have a son through her. Abram heeded Sarai's voice. 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan, Abram's wife Sarai took her slave Hagar, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband Abram as a wife. He came to Hagar and she became pregnant. And when she saw that she had become pregnant, her mistress became for her an object of scorn. Sarai then said to Abram, my wrong is on your head. I put my slave in your arms. No sooner did she see that she was pregnant, I became for her an object of scorn. Let the Eternal judge between us. So Abram said to Sarai, look, your slave is in your hands. Do to her as you please. Sarai then so afflicted her that she ran away. And an angel of the Eternal found her at the spring of water in the wilderness, at the spring on the road to Shur. The angel said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, whence have you come and where are you going? She answered, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Eternal said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her ill treatment. The angel of the Eternal went on to say to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants. They shall be too numerous to count. And then the angel of the Eternal continued, look, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. Call him Ishmael, for the Eternal has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild ass of a man. His hand shall be against all, and the hand of all shall be against him. He shall dwell in permanent opposition to all his kin. So she called the Eternal who had been speaking to her. You are El Roi? Meaning by this? Even here I have seen the back of the one who looks upon me. That is why that well, the one located between Kadesh and Bered, is called Beer Lacha Roi. Hagar bore to Abram a son, and Abram called his son whom Hagar had borne Ishmael. When Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram, Abram was 86 years old.
Thank you so much, Gary. Let me invite Jim. Would you like to read a little bit, starting at the very start of chapter 17?
Thank you, Rabbi. When Abram was 99 years old, Adonai appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai, walk in my ways and be blameless. I will establish my covenant between me and you, and I will make you exceedingly numerous. Abram threw himself on his face, and God spoke to him further. As for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be the father of a multitude of nations, and you shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I make you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fertile and make nations of you, and kings shall come forth from you. I will maintain my covenant between me and you and your offspring to come as an everlasting covenant throughout the ages, to be God to you and to your offspring to come. I assign in the land you sojourn into, you and your offspring to come, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting holding. I will be their God.
Thank you so much, Jim. David and Susan, would you like to read starting at verse 9?
Yes,
Thank you, Rabbi.
thank you, Rabbi. And God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my commandment, you and your seed after you through their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your seed after you. Every male among you must be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. 8 days old, every male among you shall be circumcised through your generations, even slaves born in the household and those purchased with silver from any foreigner who is not of your seed. Those born in your household and those purchased with silver must be circumcised, and my covenant in your flesh shall be an everlasting covenant.
An uncircumcised male who is not circumcised the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. God then said to Abraham, Sarai, your wife, call her Sarai no more, for her name is now Sarah. I will bless her, and two, I will give you a son through her, and I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Rulers of people shall come from her. Abraham fell flat on his face and laughed, thinking, can a child be born to a man of 100? Can a 90-year-old Sarah bear a child? Abraham then said to God, if only you would let Ishmael live happily before you. But God said, nonetheless, your wife Sarah shall bear you a son, whom you shall call Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him and his descendants after him as an everlasting covenant. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. See, I have blessed him and made him fruitful and made him exceedingly numerous. He will father 12 princes. I will make him into a great nation. But it is with Isaac, who Sarah will bear for you at this time next year, that I will establish my covenant. Done with speaking with him, God ascended away from Abraham.
Thank you both so much. I'd like to invite Catherine, if you would read our concluding verses there, starting with verse 23.
Thank you, Rabbi. Then Abraham took his son Ishmael and all his homeborn slaves and all those he had bought, every male in Abraham's household, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins on that very day, as God had spoken to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he circumcised the flesh of his foreskin, and his son Ishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Thus Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised on that very day, and all his household, his homeborn slaves, and those that had been bought from outsiders were circumcised with him.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for the week. I invite you to take out the study sheet. I'd like to share with you a focused study about it. And for this week, the focus starts with the opening of our Torah portion, from which we get its name. And on the study sheet, I've printed out for you how the opening words appear, not in the editions that many of us are reading from, but in the Torah scroll itself, which the letters that you see there are without any vowels. They are merely the same two letters are repeated, and the Lamed and the Chaf Sofit, and the Lamed and the Chaf Sofit, and it is could have been vocalized as Lech, Lech, which would mean go, go. And so in that sense, we would be having those letters represent a kind of an imperative, or that really, you really need to go. And instead, as we've seen many times before in our Torah readings, the ambiguity of the Hebrew itself is an invitation for us to help construct the meaning of the words. And so in step our creative artists who are helping to shape not only what they mean, but how these letters should be articulated, vocalized. And tradition has developed a consensus that the way these for these two words to be articulated is Lech, Lecha. So now what does that mean? Lech, Lecha. Well, again, in step our creative artists who struggle to extract meaning from this rather unusual construction of these words. And our first is Rashi, our medieval commentator, who says, what this means is Lech means go, and Lecha means for yourself. And what he means by that is, this will be for your benefit. Go forward for your good. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to go forth for your benefit and for your good? Well, our assembly of creative artists, known as in the Zohar, they struggle with this as well. And they come up with this formulation. Once the Blessed Holy One saw Abraham's arousal and desire, God immediately revealed God's self to him, saying, go to yourself, know yourself, to refine yourself, to perfect your rung. When it's referring to perfect your rung, we're talking about the system that the Zohar plays with his Kabbalah, the notion that there are different rungs of divine emanation that one can ascend to reach a higher state of contact with the divine. So the Zohar is saying, yes, this is not just for your benefit, meaning that if you go this way, you'll be rich, or that you become famous. It means go into yourself and transform yourself. So now we're going to play with this notion here, and we're going to explore what this very first verse offers up, and explore how other of our creative artists, particularly within the Hasidic tradition, understand what is happening here. So our verse then proceeds to say, go forth from your native land and from your father's house. And we bring in our Hasidic commentator, Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Lehner, whose teachings were produced in a book called Mehashiloach. Rabbi Lehner lived from about 1801 to about 1854, and he was the founder of a particular Hasidic dynasty known as the Ishbitzer dynasty. And this is the way in his work, the Mehashiloach, Rabbi Lehner understands this. Go forth from your native land. In other words, get away from old habits. And then the next phrase, from your father's house. And Rabbi Lehner goes on to say, in other words, do not look at the way things seem at first glance, but rather to the root of the matter. Rabbi Lehner in Mehashiloach seems to be saying that as a precondition for this journey that you're to go on, this sacred journey, which is going to be transformative of you, you first need to let go of all your preconceptions. You need to let go of all your biases. You need to let go of all those intellectual frameworks that you've carried with you that cause you to make quick assumptions about what you see before you and what to make of them. And then he goes beyond that and he says, and it's important not just to look at things superficially, but you need to go deep. And the deepness is, in fact, the trajectory of this journey in particular. Before we get to our painter for this evening, I remember a phrase that Pablo Picasso has in his autobiography. He says, it took me 4 years to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child. And I think what Picasso was talking about there is that it was easy to learn to be able to replicate what had come before me, the way masters before me had painted. That was easy, but it took my entire life to get back to myself, my authenticity, who I was, to journey backwards in a sense, deep within inside me, to be able to bring that forth. And complementing this journey that we're on, that the Mehashiloach has sent us on, we have our 20th century philosopher Ibn Husserl, who said, one suspends what one knows so that one might discover what one could not see before. This notion of suspension of preconceptions, suspensions of belief, if you will, suspensions of biases seems to be an important precondition in order to see something that you had never seen before. So where is this journey taking us? If you turn over on the sheet, we're going to explore what the another one of our Hasidic teachers is going to help us see. And this is from the Sfat Emet, who was late 19th century Hasidic rabbi. And he says, well, our verse says that God says to Abraham, I'm going to take you to the land, you're going to go to the land that I will show you. And Sfat Emet says, where I will make you visible, where your potential being will be realized in multiform and unpredictable ways. So the Sfat Emet is indicating that, as is the tendency of the Hasidic tradition, which is not to look so much as at matters of cosmology, matters of what's happening outside of oneself, but to focus on the inner self. The transformation of one's inner self is what brings God more into the world. And Sfat Emet is saying, I'm going to take you to a land that I will show you. And where that is where you become more manifest in multiform and unpredictable ways. So let's explore this notion a little further. We're going to go back to our Rabbi Lehner in Mei HaShiloach, who's also going to help us see what is this land that I will show you that's referred to in this very first verse of this week's Torah portion. Abraham desired to know the place where his life essence was intensely joined to God and how far it reached. To the land which I will show you means that your intense union will be in a place called which I will show you. For God has no end and will always increase the lights of the blessed infinite more and more for you. And this you will find in the land of Israel. Mei HaShiloach is talking about the land of Israel. He's not really talking about a physical geography. He's talking about, if you will, a dimension of self, talking about a state of being in which one is constantly encountering an infinite source of blessings and love and renewal. And so, if you will, where Abraham is being taken, according to this Hasidic reading, is to a place that is of infinite desire, because that is what has started this whole journey, according to this bit of commentary, was Abraham's desire and yearning to connect with the source of all life. And the promise is, that's what you're going to experience. And because I myself, according to the divine, am endless, it's going to be an endless source of desire, because that is what powers creation, an endless source of desire, to be in communion and contact with others. So now we take a look at our artist, Vasily Kandinsky. Vasily Kandinsky was born towards the end of the 19th century in Russia. He died in 1944 in France. And Kandinsky, first of all, was involved in pre and immediately post-revolutionary Russia in the avant-garde art movement there, which was starting to really explore what does it mean to have paintings in which there are no identifiable physical objects, in which the objects that are there on the canvas are either pure shapes or forms, and it's primarily exploring the color. And Kandinsky becomes one of those who really begins to shape modern art with his rejection of the importance of form and the elevation of color, saying it's color that really is what's important here. That's the conveyor of a deeper contact with the universe. Kandinsky himself, who first had left Russia, he goes to Germany in the early 20s. He teaches at the Bauhaus, which is the center of modern art and architecture at the time. Then the Nazis closed that in 1933, and he flees to France, where he lives during World War II, and he dies in 1944. But Kandinsky is also remarkable because he experienced this neurological condition called synesthesia, in which he heard colors, and he heard colors musically. And he wrote that as a child, when he had a box of crayons, he could hear the crayons sizzling within the crayon box. And for him, music was really the highest form of expression. And so when he painted, he was painting tones and rhythms and sounds and notes. And this is what he was conveying on his canvas. And for him, what was important was not what he was seeing with his eye that was outside of him. What was important, what was he was experiencing inside of himself, what he was seeing inside of himself. And that's what he was trying to share. He wrote a very lovely and important book called The Spiritual in Art. And he wrote this: the artist should be blind to the importance of recognition or non-recognition and deaf to the teachings and demands of the time. His eye should be directed to his inner life, and his ear should hearken to the words of inner necessity. Now, it might be an overreach to try and merely overlay what Kandinsky is describing as the work of an artist to what is happening in our Torah portion. But one can read what Kandinsky is saying here and at least play with the notion that Abraham is responding to something that he is in his inner life. His eyes should be directed to his inner life, and his ears should hearken to the words of an inner necessity. Kandinsky mounts a revolution in the art world where the shapes and forms are no longer what's significant. They are mere vehicles at the most for music. And the music is what is represented by the colors on his canvases. On our study sheet, we have this painting that he did in 1940 called Around the Circle. Its background is black, and then it's filled with these biomorphic forms, which are floating in this space here. And it's a question whether it represents a sign of hope that he painted during this time of conflict in Europe, or whether it represents a sign of despair, that things are just being shattered and allowed to float aimlessly in the abyss that the dark color may represent. But he was nevertheless a revolutionary in his elevation of color above form. So the question is, from an artistic point of view, is what he was doing, was it a sharp break with what came before him, or was it a fulfillment, in a sense, of what came before him? So I look at our Torah portion. Abraham is clearly embarking upon a path that has not been walked before. He has been given this particular mission. He's going to start the beginning of a whole new nation, which is going to transform world history. Is what Abraham doing a sharp break with what humanity has tried before, or is it somehow a fulfillment of what humanity has been struggling to achieve before? And so I look at the end of last week's Torah portion, And I noticed this. Last week's Torah portion ends with a story about his father, Terah. And it says, Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his sons Abram, and they set out together from Ur of the Chaldeans for the land of Canaan. But when they had come as far as Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah came to 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So here is Abraham's father, who's headed to the same place that God has told Abraham he's to go to start this whole new enterprise, this new community, the land of Canaan. In that sense, Abraham is, on the one hand, he's starting something quite new, but on the other hand, he's fulfilling a journey that his father himself had been on. And that seems to be, to me, kind of one of the key features of the Jewish tradition, which is the notion that tradition can be fulfilled to the extent that we have new paths and new innovations. This balance between innovation and continuity, I think, is one of the precious lessons that we gain from our Jewish tradition. And it takes us to a place of infinite desire. And perhaps in harking back to our lesson from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, this notion of all the world is a very narrow place. And if we open ourselves up to the inner voice, if we explore ourselves, if we reconstruct ourselves, if we challenge ourselves, then we can get from a place of oneness to a new place of oneness. And the bridge is what takes us there, a bridge of infinite desire, ongoing questioning, and a wholeness. So with that, I'd love to hear what you experienced and what you saw in the course of our reading and studying tonight. We call upon Robert, please.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I have to tell you, I had an experience today with a lovely man. And after really a lovely soul, but I came back and I said to my wife, and I said, sweetheart, this is a lovely person, but not someone I could have a meaningful conversation about. And I'm very thankful for the meaningful conversation we have on Thursdays. And I think tonight, some of the subjects that have come up are especially rich. For example, 16:9, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress, and here we go, and submit thyself unto her hands. I have heard it said that patience is the most difficult quality to acquire. And in my own life, I think that's true, because that means we're tested. And this is an age of testing. We look at what's going on in the world. I don't want to be graphic, but all we have to do is know the detail. And my goodness, our blood boils. But yet, I remember what Baha'u'llah says. He says, be patient, for thy Lord is patient. And then the other thing that came to mind, and again, it's so subtle, but yet it's utterly profound, because these are timeless qualities. And then in 1723, how do we get that? How do we acquire that? In 1723, it says, and Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the selfsame day, as God had said unto him. So there we have observance, conformity to the will of God. And then one can say, sure, but how do you get that? And we can all use different terms. But you said something, I love the language. Endless source of desire. Anybody who has a relationship with their creator that's real, that's what drives us. And I'm reminded of, I believe it's a verse somewhere, nearer to, or maybe it's in a hymn, nearer to thee, my Lord, nearer to thee. And the fact that I've come to respect so much that this is a group that is really committed to improving their lives, not to fight about theology, not to get stuck in a box. I abhor boxes except for shoes, but to really have a passion for transformation. And again, another word that's dear to me, but you mentioned. And I think tonight is especially rich because there are just too many things tonight that have been brought up that could have really been dwelt on. But really, thank you so much to all of you. And I always appreciate being here and the commitment this group has to a better life, to education, to self-improvement. Every great teacher has taught us to come together. They didn't teach us to fight about theology.
Robert, I want to thank you for that. And you remind me that this week when I wrote about this notion about how we all seek some kind of certainty and that oftentimes that's what ideologies and doctrines try to provide us with. And here in this week's Torah portion, there's no certainty for Abraham. What he's offered is a journey of uncertainty. It's going to be a place I will show you. He doesn't say, I'm going to take you to Canaan. He says, God starts off by saying, I'm going to show you, you're going to go to a place that I will show you. And so the notion about this is Abraham committing to a journey of ongoing self-revelation and discovery and growth and development. And that's ultimately what it is. And it's all fueled by what you described of his ongoing desire just to be attached to the source of the source that brought everything into existence. And he's going to experience that in an ongoing way. And for him, for the Jewish Bible describes this as a journey that has no end. It has no finality. And it's fascinating that that's what modern physics, if you will, teaches us about the universe itself. It has no end, has no finality. It's just constantly expanding. And we seek to be in attunement with that universe. So thank you for reminding us of all that. Beautiful words. Thank you. Let me invite David and Susan and then Catherine to share. Thank you.
So I was struck in this Torah portion that with the emphasis that you're putting on, you go forth and you find yourself, and that over and over again in this Torah portion, it talks about God will make your seed multiply. And it talks over and over about seed. And I realized that it's because that seed is what's going to continue the journey. And it's incumbent upon our children and our children's children to keep searching.
Thank you, Susan. That's so beautiful. And to know that what you're getting me to think is that we have, before we started this evening, Richard here reminded us all of the story about the tree that Honi is planting, which he will never see the fruit of, but that's what you do. And that's what the enrichment is all about. It's not just a matter of clutching on to something and of rapaciously gathering for one's own self. It's a matter of sowing and a harvest that may be for others. So thank you. Let me call upon Catherine and then Richard here. So, and then Catherine. So Catherine, please.
Okay. Sort of to follow from what Susan said, I was struck by how Sarai is preoccupied with succession, right? How are they going to create another generation? And that this anxiety is sort of replaced by this idea of projecting into a future through a journey and that the journey will not be undertaken by Ishmael, but there will be someone else to come. And so we have this layering of time and this kind of projection into the future that I think we're being asked not to feel some kind of anxiety about. See, there are questions, but not to be pressed into that kind of anxiety that Sarai is experiencing. And then I looked at the painting, and what is kind of fascinating is this question of temporality. Are all of these objects floating around simultaneously, or do they represent sort of layers in time for us?
And so let me just play with that a little further, because this is what you got me to think about. And if what is really on the canvas are not images, but music, then is it music that's are these notes that are being played simultaneously, or is it a score that is to be, be played over time rather than? So that's lovely. Thank you so much for that.
Exactly.
Let me, Richard, and then Kath.
Yeah. Piggybacking on something that was said there and what's in here, that it's clear, don't go after gold, don't go after stuff, don't go after self-enlargement. What's the task here is to learn how to be a human being. If we're down below, not living by the rules, we weaken the power of God above. It takes the togetherness of us and the Maker, that nothingness out there, to think not in terms of me, but in terms of the species. There's an experience going on in this, as I see it, in this temporal finite world, to see if it can be possible to govern. And here we are at another conflict between Israel, between Isaac and Ishmael, as it were. That's going on. We have these wars, we have these periods, we get through them, we have expansive years, and each time there's a little growth of a better understanding of what the human species is. And the experiment, you get a chance to be in here for a limited amount of time, you get 100 years more or less, and then you got to go. So this isn't the end all and be all, but this is a chance to learn something about the attachment to the basic energy in the universe and become part of it. If not, then we're caught up at the top of the tower, and then it's all over.
So Richard, here's what you got me to think about, because you mentioned about the relationship between Abraham and God. And we have this ceremony that's described in the text, the burnt offering, and then it's cut in half, and then there's the torch that's passed between the two halves. So that is what our scholars tell us is the kind of ceremony that two sovereigns would perform as a way of establishing their alliance with one another. And so in a sense, what's happening here, this covenant that's being described, is not a kind of relationship between a sovereign and a subject. It's a relationship between two sovereigns, and that they are to be mutually beneficial. There's some kind of mutuality between the sovereign that we call God and the sovereign that we're calling Abraham here, that they are engaged in something that's going to benefit both, and that they need one another, that there is that kind of consummate partnership that's happening here, which is, of course, very radical notion in the ancient world, and perhaps even in this world, to have that sense that that the divine needs us as much as we need the divine, and that we have that kind of mutual relationship for a mutual benefit. Kath, please.
Thanks. I was thinking about what you were saying regarding what multiple people have said about the seed, there's some thought of like the result. The seeds are a result. And I was thinking what this seems to be so much about is the journey, like what do you get while, because you're not going to get to the end of it, just like with Moses, he doesn't get to go across, but it's learning as you go. It's, there's a saying about that, right? It's not about the journey, it's the journey, not the result. So I think that feels a lot about maybe what part of this message is.
Thank you. Yeah, the notion that this is a journey that really has this ongoing aspect to it rather than a finality to it is conveyed here in the interpretations of these verses, and is certainly what's structured into the whole Jewish Bible, that is an endless journey. And so is the journey for self-reconstruction and refinement. And let me...
There was just one more little
Yeah.
thing, which was in the painting there, you were asking, is it, dark, is it light, is it a negative, is it a positive? And I somehow, when I see a door, because there's the door that's there with the little steps going up to it, that always seems like hope, like there's more, there's something behind the door. It's not a complete end. There's that potential for that.
Thank you for pointing out the door and the steps. Thank you. And that's, I think, a key element in it.
Concrete things.
Thank you. Thank you. And others, did you want to say something, Anna?
Well, I looked at this picture tonight for the first time. I didn't look at it until we sat at the table. I thought, that sure does look like a lot of music to me. It looks like music. It looks like cymbals and tubas. It looks like little tiny flutes and those little hand cymbals. It looks like you've got the whole ball of wax there. And then when if you put all the sounds together, when you have a real symphony, you have depth of sound, you have loud, you have soft pianissimo, you have delicate strings, or like really, it's like a music. I would like to study his work a bit and just see those colors and see about assigning tones to them. Yeah, would that be fun? To see what it would sound like?
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And let me call upon Jay, please.
Thank you, Rabbi. When music was just mentioned, I'm reminded of Piet Mondrian's Broadway Boogie Woogie, which, if anyone knows it, is basically music, or I guess of the streets of New York put to art with the different notes and staccatos and the bars. There's a couple of thoughts of looking at the painting. First of all, as is my habit, this painting especially, it's called Around the Circle. So it is not a circular painting. However, this is the circle, but if you look into the infinite distance, there are other circles there, which he can also hone in on and look around those circles too. Those are all circles with little emanations coming out of them in the distance. So it is endless. And what is to be discovered surrounding and inside of each circle is also almost infinite. This painting lends itself, as with, I don't know about word programs, but LibreOffice allows you, again, to turn it in different ways. This painting looks remarkable, turned upside down, and it's very interesting at an angle or at either side. So it really is not made to orient us in our preconceived north, south, east, west, up, down. It is, as space is, has no boundaries. And my last comment is, Abraham has really no idea of the land that God is going to show him. All that time later, after the Exodus, the Israelites have an image of the land that God is going to show them. He's out there. He's not saying Lech, Lecha, to a land. There, through all of their human foibles, delay that. With the golden calf, they delay it for 40 years and this and that. And even their leader isn't precisely following God. So once you do procreate and become as numerous as stars the nation, it becomes like herding Jews. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much, Jay. And what you have all reminded me of is what's at the very heart of this message of this week's Torah portion, which is Abraham's desire to make contact with the source that created this whole existence that we call creation. And the message that is contained within Torah is, if you want to get there, if you want to be in contact with the source that has created everything and sustains everything on a daily basis, you need to begin by going deep within yourself. That to get to me, if you capital M, you need to go through yourself. And that degree of transformation is what's at the very heart of the beginning of this journey. And indeed, the notion that we can set aside those limitations that we have when we look at one another, the limiting frameworks that we have when we meet other people, and which doesn't allow us to see that perhaps they too are a part of this great journey. Perhaps they too are desirous of having connection with the source of all of existence. And it's hard as a human being to avoid the temptations of putting back on those limiting frameworks. It's hard as a human being to avoid the temptations of self-protection, of self-aggrandizement, of self-isolation. And so I think, going back to Rabbi Nachman, it's a very narrow bridge, this human existence. The precipices are all around us. It's easy to fall into the abyss of nihilism. And so,
but the thing is to not fear.
and the thing is not to fear, and as the Hebrew puts it in this reflexive form, don't make yourself afraid. And the way we do that is, the more we remove our self-imposed limitations, we find so many people on the journey as well. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for being companions on that journey, which makes getting across that narrow bridge so much more hopeful. God bless you all. I look forward to our regathering next time. Thank you. Be well.
Mhm.